To build a simple paintable landscape with different textures, essentially all you're going to need is some kind of texture maps for different materials that you'd like to use. Now I've just got a diffuse map, an ARM or an ORM, which is ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic, packed map, and a normal map for each of mine. But you can also just do this with just diffuse if you're going for something more cartoony, doesn't really matter. Where I've gotten these is I've just got them off a website called Polyhaven, where you can get a bunch of free textures here. Otherwise, there's plenty of other websites out there. Quixel, which used to be all free inside of Unreal, still has their stuff here. If you just go like nature and terrain in the materials, you can sort by lowest first, and you can still get a bunch of free stuff here. So there's a bunch out there. Otherwise, you can make your own in other programs, whatever you kind of need. First things first, if you are importing these things, make sure your roughness metallic maps, if they're packed or not, they are unticked sRGB. So you just open them up and you want to just scroll over to here and untick this sRGB. That'll just make it into a linear color map. If you're doing this with a lot of things, a little trick you can do is grab them. And I'll grab this one just to show you the difference. And you can go for asset actions, which is right here. And then I can go edit selection in property matrix. And this is a nice way where you can see here, there's just some tick boxes. So you can just do it here and it will just save that really nicely. Cool. So now we're ready to get started and set these up. What we're going to need is we're going to make material functions for each of these textures. This will just keep it clean and modular and sort of separate, and you'll be able to edit them. So we're going to go right click in the empty space, material, and we're going to go for advanced and then material function. We're going to name this to whatever our textures or our materials are going to be, the ones we're going to paint. So I'm going to call it MF for material function. And my first one is rock face. So I'm going to go for that. And we'll just set up one because we're actually going to kind of set it up and then duplicate it across for the other one. So I'm going to jump into here, MF rock face. You'll see you get an output result here. This is where we're going to plug in our textures, right? So we're just going to start by jumping into our content drawer, and I'm going to grab all three of my textures here. Like I said, you could have less or more. You're just going to have to set it up the same way, and you'll hopefully get the idea after this. Cool. I'm going to just lay them out like so. So I've got base color at the top here, ORM, ARM in the middle, and then the normal map at the bottom here. I'm going to make a node just in front of them. I'm just right click and I'm going to go set material attributes. This is going to give me a node where I can add material attribute inputs essentially. So I'm just going to hit this plus a few times. I'm just going to click it 4 times for now. And we're just going to kind of plug in the values here. So I'm going to go for our base color at the top. That will just go straight into here. We should actually change this one as well. So where it says specular, we should change that to normal. So that's the correct one. We can plug in the ambient occlusion as well from this map, but we won't really use it. So I'm just going to leave it like so. So base color RGB into here. This is the ORM, ARM. So it's RGB is ambient occlusion for red, roughness is green, and then metallic is blue. So like I said, the ambient occlusion doesn't really get used by default. So I'm going to leave it out. And I'm just going to go G into my roughness and then B into my metallic. You can change the order of these, but I find it's just easier. Doesn't really matter at the end of the day as long as they're plugged into the right ones. RGB of the normal map then into normal, of course, right? And then that just plugs in to the output result here. And you'll just see that up in the top right as well. It will give you an output of your material. Before we leave, we just want to do some extra little bits here. We're going to go to each one of these texture samples and just right click and go convert to parameter and then name it. So I'm going to call this base color. I'm going to put a U in there if you're an American. And I'm going to right click here, go parameter and go ORM, occlusion, roughness, metallic. And then I'm going to do this one and call it normal. This will just let me replace them in my duplicated ones a lot easier. Before we leave as well, we also are going to put an input node, function input. This is just going to be a way where we can actually control like the scale of these in our sort of master material as well, but also have the ability to kind of change it for each one unique. So what I mean by that is we're going to go to the input in that we made. I think it defaults to vector 3. We're going to change this to a vector 2. So function input vector 2 down the bottom left here. I'm going to click that. And then in here, well, the output of these, we're going to use to drive the UVs. So we're just going to drag into every single one of these UVs. You'll see the material kind of screws up for now. Then I'm also going to tick use preview value as default. And I'm going to right click before it and look for a texture coordinate node, which you can find by just TEX, and then put that into there. And that's the default sort of UV setup. And this will let you customize the UV tiling of this one specifically if you jump in here. But what it will also do is when we put in our master material, we'll have the input in, we can kind of override it. So save and apply. Well, just save, we'll do both. That'll be fine. And this is kind of finished as a basic setup. You can customize this more. You can add a whole bunch of other stuff in here, right? Go crazy. There's plenty of videos out there on kind of making this more intense. This is a very nice, easy setup. So I'm going to close this. And now I'm just going to duplicate it. It's important that you duplicate it. You can't use instances for this because the parameters can't be different. I don't really know the technical reasons, but you just can't. So just click on it, Control D will duplicate it. And then I'm just going to call it my next one. So my next one is called Rocky Terrain. And then I'm just going to jump in, right? And then I'm going to click parameters in the left here. I'm going to drag it up so that I can jump into my content drawer and just drag these across, right? So my next one's Rocky Terrain, ORM, base color, or diffuse, you could have called it as well, and then normal map in here. And that one's done as well, right? So if I just go for and apply, you'll see it change here to that Rocky Terrain. And I just repeat that process. So Control D again, jump over here. My last one is Sandy Gravel. And I'm just going to, again, jump in here, go to parameters, open my content drawer, and drag these guys across. So base color, normal, and ORM, and apply. And now I have 3 textures, essentially 3 materials, but they're all material functions. So now what we do, right click again, we head to material. We're just going to make a basic material. We're going to go M underscore, and we can call it something like landscape. I'll just call it landscape painter. And I'm going to jump in here and we're going to set this up. So first things first, we're going to actually click on the output here and find use material attributes on the left. And I'm going to tick that. And this will just make the output just the basic material attribute. So it's going to take that as an input. We're then going to just right click next to that. And we're going to look for landscape layer blend, this guy here. I'm going to click that one. And what this node is going to do is let us blend between as many landscape materials and maps as we kind of want. And again, you can set this up more intense if you would like. So I'm going to go to layers here and I'm just going to 1, 2, 3. These are how many layers I've created. I can make more if I wanted to, but that's what I've got. And then I'm just going to open these all up and name them. So our first one was, well, let's just have a look again. It's Rock Face, Rocky Terrain, and Sandy Gravel. So we'll name them the same. Rock Face and Rocky Terrain. And then Sandy Gravel. And you can see that they have named correctly here. Cool. And now all we do is we drag our material function in, right? So we put rock face there, rocky terrain there, sandy gravel here. And you'll notice it's got the result, which is our material attributes. We could have renamed that, but it doesn't really matter in this case. We know what it is. And we're just going to go for result into the layer, into the layer, into the layer. And that is kind of all set up for the layer blend. We can put the output here. That final thing that I was talking about of overriding, what we can do here is just right click and go for landscape texture chord or layer chords, I think it's called. Yeah, this one here, landscape layer chords. This is just like a nicer way to increase their scaling afterwards because you can kind of scale up instead of tiling, you have to go down. So I'm going to override the inputs of these using the landscape coordinates, right? And that's going to just give me the ability to do this mapping scale here. Later on, I'll be able to change that and we'll see that in a second. So this is super basic, right? And again, you can add to this. You can also now customize the hell out of these, right? Like if you jump in here, this is just your material function. If you update this, it will update the output of this, which is really nice. So you can have super unique sort of setups for each material inside here. Cool, let's go apply. That's all we kind of need for now. And we're just gonna go back out. And I'm gonna go to my landscape here. So I've just made one. If you don't know how to do that, maybe watch another video before you start texturing them. But we can just go down to right here where it says material, landscape material, and I'm going to drag my M landscape painter over there. It will look like this when you first create it. It'll be all black and weirdly shiny. But now we just have to make layers. So we just jump up to our landscape mode. We head to paint here and we just look for this section down the bottom. So we got layers. And if you just click this little guy on the right, create layers from assigned materials, it should read all 3 of those layers super easily, and you've created the layers. Now to actually paint on them, you will need to create layer info. So you just have to click this little plus, go for this weight blended layer, normal, click that. It'll then now just like make a new folder called shared assets. I just leave these how they are and just go save. If you want to get specific, you can do different, but I'm just going to go through all of them. Just hit the plus, weight blended layer, save, and now we've got them all. And now we can jump in here using our paint and we can paint different sections to be how we want, right? And I can go to sandy gravel and it now paints all of them onto our scene. And that last thing I was sort of saying, if we go back to our landscape material real quick, we could just jump into this landscape coordinates and you can just increase this mapping scale, right? So if I did just something like 5 for an example and just went for an apply, you'll see now that the scaling has changed, right? It's updated to be larger. You can set up parameters and stuff for that. If you just multiply the output, that'll work the same way. But this works really nicely and you can just go again, make new material functions by duplicating, put new textures in if you would like to. Then you just need to jump in here and plug them in the same way. Hopefully that helps.